Okay, does copyright last forever? This is an exercise that I do normally when I'm in a group of people, and I try to ask the group of people what is the oldest song that they can think of. Now, this works really, really well with middle school age, and even somewhat good with high school. The older you get, though, the you'll see the wheels turn to it. They kind of figure out what I'm trying to get them to do. Because it's hilarious whenever I talk to middle school age kids and they say, "What's the oldest song you can think of?" They'll say stuff like Michael Jackson's Thriller. I'm like, "Oh, that's from '81 or from the '80s, right?" And I'm just like, "I was born in '81, so yeah, that's not really old." But eventually they'll say something like the Beatles, and so that'll get a little bit more older. And then hopefully somebody says something along the lines of Beethoven. And you're like, excellent. So we Google Beethoven's, and we look up one of his symphonies to see when it was created. And it's created several hundred years ago, which is great because then I get to ask the question, well, who owns the copyrights to Beethoven's music? And they say, well, I don't really know. I mean, I say, do you think it's his children? They're like, yeah, probably. That makes sense. I was like, well, if it's several hundred years, it's going to be his grandkids, 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 grandkids. And if everybody has two kids, then there's two kids here. And you got to split it two ways. Then you got to split it four ways after that. And then 8, 16, so on and so on. And then get to a point, it's like, well, it just becomes way too much of a hassle. So who owns the rights to something as old as Beethoven? And the idea that we get to is like once something gets super, super old, right? Copyright does not last forever. The Berne Convention says it's 50 years after the author's death is kind of the standard. In the USA, we usually go with 70 years. Now, there's a lots of things that factors that can come with that as well, right? It's not just 70 years after the death of an author because there's way too much money to be had in things that are owned by corporations. So but this is a good general rule that you can think of is 70 years after the death of the copyright, the creator, of the person who owned the copyright, then it kind of falls in this place that once after the 70 years and the copyright runs out, it falls into this place called the public domain. And now the public domain is this place where copyright free things are. Once the copyright is expired, everything goes into the public domain, right? And also, you can also place things into the public domain that if you are wanting them to be like for everybody, if you don't care about the copyright for it, you could put it in the public domain. Things that are created by the government are always inside of the public domain because they can't use them to make money. So anything that's taken by the Forestry Service or by NASA or something like that instantly enters into the public domain and can be used and adapted by anyone. So other big famous books, the Sherlock Holmes series, one of the reasons why we see so many Sherlock Holmes knockoffs, in today's society, there's like 4 or 5 TV shows right now that are out there about Sherlock, is because the intellectual property itself is so old that it doesn't have copyright anymore, so you can use it and you can use the likeness and people already know it. You can also think about famous songs like we talked about with Beethoven's songs. You don't have to pay somebody for the copyright to use it in like a commercial. You don't have to get permission to use it because it's in the public domain. So now we see, we'll stop there with that one. Pause.